April of 2025 is set to be an exciting time for the shipping industry. Taking place at this time will be MEPC 83, the 83rd session of the Marine Environment Protection Committee. For those who may not know, the MEPC is a group within the International Maritime Organization, or IMO, which is itself an agency of the United Nations. Whilst the IMO oversees worldwide shipping regulations, the MEPC focuses specifically on protecting the environment from pollution caused by ships. Anyway, the reason MEPC 83 is exciting is that it will finalise the legal frameworks for regulations that were developed at this year's committee meeting. These included, for example, the adoption of a new marine fuel standard and greenhouse gas emissions pricing system. I guess what I'm trying to say in this introduction is that the next couple of years will mark a big period of change in the maritime industry, and we definitely need that change to come. In a 2020 study by the IMO, it was reported that global shipping demand was responsible for 3% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. And as global GDP has grown, so has the energy demand of the shipping industry, a trend which inevitably seems set to continue. Note on this graph that even whilst efficiency improvements have led to some decoupling of the two lines, the overall gradient is still upwards. Put simply, the status quo can no longer be followed. Commercial shipping, and the ships on which it depends, need a rethink. Now I know I sort of said that efficiency improvements aren't getting us far enough, but they still remain effective short-term strategies. And I want to focus on one such strategy in particular, which is the wind. It's probably the oldest method of maritime propulsion, yet in modern day shipping there's a sense it's been extremely overlooked. Recent years though have seen an array of philosophies and designs developed that would allow the seagoing giants of today to harness this energy in more effective ways than ever previously possible. According to a Lloyd's Register report, the most popular system as of 2023 has been Flettner rotors. Also known as rotor sails, which, by the way, look nothing like sails, they work through a phenomenon known in fluid mechanics as the Magnus effect. In essence, you have a large cylinder rotated at up to 300 RPM. As the wind flows over the cylinder, it interacts with it, causing the flow on one side to move faster than the other. By Bernoulli's principle, the side with the faster moving air has a lower pressure, and so a resultant force is produced perpendicular to the wind direction. As you've probably realised, this therefore is only really effective for crosswinds, but the systems can be relatively simple, and the first ship to use them actually set sail in 1925. The ones being used today are massive structures though, reaching 18 to 25 metres in height and up to 5 metres in diameter. Looking forward, an increasingly popular system has been suction wings. Again, these use clever fluid mechanics effects to maximise lift. Suction wings can be thought of as an upgrade from conventional wing sails, which are also in use today. The problem with these conventional hard sails is that they have a limited angle of attack, defined as the angle at which the wing meets the wind. So why is this a problem then? Increasing the angle of attack increases the lift, so ideally it's something we want to maximise. The issue with conventional aerofoils is that above some angle of attack we get this phenomenon known as boundary layer separation, where the airflow stops following the curvature of the wing, causing a sudden loss in lift. Suction wings, as the name suggests, solves this problem by using an internal fan to suck the flow onto the wing to keep it attached. This means that these wings can operate at much higher angle of attack, and so a much greater lift of up to 7 times more than a wing sail. Now, a final technology worth mentioning here, more for its novelty than likelihood of widespread adoption, is kite sails. These are indeed exactly as they sound, basically using airborne sails to pull the ship along much like a kite surfer would, taking advantage of typically faster wind speeds at higher altitude. An example of this is French company Airseas, who are developing a kite with a 1,000 metre squared surface, which they say could reduce emissions by 20% on average. There are, however, quoted to be kite sizes of up to 5,000 metres squared in development right now. The Lloyd's Register report predicts that there will be over 200 projected installations of wind propulsion systems by 2026, which are forecast to be predominantly suction wings followed by Flettner rotors. The factors in their adoption will include their ability to be retracted and systems automated, since having a huge sail up when there is no wind or a headwind could work opposite to the desired effect. Average fuel savings predictions range from 5 to 15% depending on the technology, but there's also a lot of ambiguity in this figure due to the inherent variability of weather conditions. Even more exciting perhaps will be the adoption of these technologies in new build ships, since the design of the ship's hull and structure itself can be optimised to maximise on wind-assisted propulsion. Aside, I think the key here is that these technologies are ones that can be implemented now, and so with immediate impact and big emissions reduction potential. But of course, reducing emissions by 1/10 isn't going to get us to a carbon neutral shipping sector. And so a hot topic at the moment is what is going to power the ships. Unlike in the aviation and automotive industry, where the options seem restricted to only a few viable alternatives, the shipping industry seems to have a much larger pool to decide from, most of which being alternative fuels. In terms of which of these fuels will be used, I think it's easiest to think in terms of short, medium and long-term strategies. What it really boils down to is change. The more you have to change existing engines, storage systems, and fuel production systems, the longer that transition will take, both because of the time for new regulations and standards to be approved, and for those novel technologies to become cost competitive. Hence, in the near term at least, the industry has focused on what we call advanced biofuels. This is because they can be integrated directly into current engines as drop-in fuels or in blends with existing fuels, but requiring very little engine modifications. According to a recent International Renewable Energy Agency or IRENA report, current regulations allow for biofuel blends of up to 20% without the need to modify the engine at all. They were estimated to cost between $72 to $238 per megawatt hour, compared to just $41 per megawatt hour quoted for traditional heavy fuel oil in 2019. So, what is the difference between advanced biofuels and regular biofuels? Advanced biofuels are defined by the European Parliament as biofuels that do not compete directly with food and feed crops, and are often synthesized from waste fats, oils, and greases like cooking oil. And so a critical issue facing widespread biofuel adoption currently is the lack of feedstock to produce them. But this was only really a short-term solution, right? So what's next? This is where it gets a little bit more vague, as the shipping industry doesn't seem to have reached a consensus themselves yet. Currently, it appears that renewable methanol is winning this race, since it again requires little engine modification. Current ships can be retrofit and run on dual fuel systems of both methanol and heavy fuel oil, maintaining flexibility in this transition period. Other advantages include that it is easy to store since it's a liquid at normal temperatures and pressures, and it's also biodegradable in water. According to Hydrogen Insight, as of March this year, there were 225 dual-fuel methanol ships on order, scheduled to start service in the next 5 years. This surge is largely motivated by changes to the EU Emissions Trading System, or ETS, which will mandate that ships operating in EU waters fully cover their emissions costs by 2026. Shipping giant Maersk recently named the 5th of its dual-fuel methanol fleet, which can switch between fuels at the touch of a button. It also has a dozen or so more scheduled to come in the next couple of years. Most renewable methanol is produced via one of two routes. Either green hydrogen is reacted with carbon dioxide captured from renewable sources to create a product known as e-methanol. Biomethanol, on the other hand, is generally made through the gasification of biomass. The biggest limitations to methanol as an alternative fuel are its lower energy density compared to conventional fuels and its price, forecast at between $107 and $145 per megawatt hour by 2050. Additionally, there are significant concerns regarding the carbon dioxide used in e-methanol production. Capturing this carbon dioxide can be expensive, and it may still lead to net carbon dioxide emissions if it was not originally removed from the atmosphere, for example through biomass growth. However, carbon capture from biomass combustion or gasification, which is required for biomethanol, faces challenges in itself due to inaccurate carbon accounting. For more details on this, feel free to check out one of my previous videos on the Drax power plant in the UK. In the midterm, methanol may be more favoured for its ease of transition, but in the long term, ammonia is considered more likely to take the lead. On the surface, ammonia appears to be an incredibly promising solution. Currently, most green ammonia is produced through the Haber-Bosch process. This involves electrolyzing water to generate green hydrogen, extracting nitrogen from the air, and then combining the two to produce ammonia. The result is a fuel composed of only nitrogen and hydrogen, and crucially, no carbon. Ammonia engines work through internal combustion, driving pistons much like a conventional fossil fuel powered engine would. The difference though is that the combustion reaction only releases nitrogen and water as the products. MAN Energy Solutions, a ship engine supplier, has just started the testing of the world's first full-scale two-stroke ammonia engine and hopes to deliver 30 of these engines in the next 3 years. So why is ammonia only just joining the party? In short, it's because ammonia is quite different to the fuels we use today, and that means not only a redesign of ships, but also of port infrastructure, safety systems, regulations, and fuel transportation methods. Ammonia is gaseous at room temperature, but it can be stored as a liquid at significantly higher temperatures than that of other gaseous fuels like hydrogen. It's also estimated that ammonia ships will require between 1.6 to 2.3 times the volume of fuel compared to those using heavy fuel oil, but with it achieving up to 92% greenhouse gas emissions reductions. One of the greatest fears around ammonia is that it's extremely corrosive and toxic. Therefore, a lot of care must be taken when handling it, and spillages would be severe. Whilst ammonia may be new in shipping though, it's a compound we have long been used to handling in the agriculture industry. Hence, at least according to the IRENA report, these safety concerns should not be a major barrier to adoption. What is more concerning, however, is the potential byproducts produced during its combustion. As we said, ammonia only produces nitrogen and water when it burns, but that was assuming complete combustion of the fuel. Incomplete combustion may lead to the formation of NOx or nitrogen oxide, an air pollutant, which presents a health risk to humans. Moreover, if uncombusted ammonia ends up in the exhaust, exposure could cause serious harm above certain concentrations. Finally, nitrous oxide may be produced as a byproduct of ammonia combustion, which is a greenhouse gas 265 times more potent than CO2. And so ammonia engine design must account for all these risks and ensure that they are adequately managed. It's predicted by IRENA that the fuel will cost between $67 and $114 per megawatt hour by 2050, so a bit cheaper than methanol. Widespread adoption though won't be easy. The International Chamber of Shipping stated in a report that if the global fleet all adopted green ammonia as a fuel, green ammonia production would have to rise by 440 million tonnes, more than treble current production, requiring 750 gigawatts of renewable energy. This would mean that shipping alone would consume 60% of the world's current renewable energy production of 2,537 gigawatts. You might also be wondering at this point, since green methanol and ammonia both use green hydrogen, why don't we just use that green hydrogen directly in, say, a fuel cell or combustion engine? The problem here is that hydrogen is a completely different fuel to anything being used today. Using hydrogen as a fuel would require a complete refit of ship fuel and engine systems. But really, the problem here comes down to fuel storage. According to an article in Forbes, even if you liquefied the hydrogen, which happens at 20 degrees above absolute zero, you'd still need 4 times the volume of fuel tanks as currently used. As a side note, battery technology is also being explored in this space, but only really for shorter routes. Now finally, it wouldn't truly be a 2024 discussion without touching on AI, right? So how is AI shaping the future of shipping? Traditional route planning based on fixed schedules and predetermined paths is increasingly being replaced by real-time dynamic optimization. Machine learning models are now capable of analysing a wide range of factors, such as engine speeds, routes, and journey times, while still meeting constraints like departure schedules, arrival windows, and designated route envelopes. What's more, these models adapt on the go to variables such as weather, sea currents, and port congestion, enhancing both safety and efficiency. Looking back at the earlier discussion on wind propulsion, AI could also be used to predict wind patterns to chart routes that optimize fuel consumption, taking advantage of this natural wind assistance. According to Orca AI, a startup in this space, integrating AI-assisted navigation on commercial vessels could reduce global carbon dioxide emissions by 47.6 million tonnes per year if adopted fleet-wide. It also says it could cut shipping distances by 38.22 million nautical miles, which is equivalent to circling the Earth 1,770 times. On top of that, the study highlights significant safety improvements, including a 33% reduction in close quarters incidents and a 40% drop in crossing conflicts in open waters. In short, AI is transforming the shipping industry, making it smarter, safer, and more sustainable. I think it's clear that the shipping industry is on the brink of a transformative era. We're witnessing a shift that's not just about adapting to stricter regulations, but about rethinking how global trade can operate sustainably. This was by no means a comprehensive coverage, but let me know if you think I've missed out something big in the comments. As always, I'm Luke, and this was The Upshift.